What's up, everyone? We're right in the middle of our new series called Your New Playlist, and no, it's not about all the playlists that you have on your Spotify or your Apple Music, which, if I had to let you guys know one of mine, there's, worship music, there's Jesus music, there's plenty of playlists for when I'm in a good mood or not, or just an acoustic set. But this series is about tapping into our superpower of our God-honoring mindset and choosing wisdom when it comes to your thoughts every day. I don't know about you, but I definitely need help with that from time to time, especially when it comes to things I'm afraid of. And one of those things I was afraid of when I was a kid was fireworks. I hated fireworks. I hated the loud noise that they made. There were so many cool fireworks. There's the ones that, just with the big booms. You got the ones that go psh, whatever it was. I was not a fan of it. There were times where I would have to leave high school football games early because I was crying and I couldn't, handle the loud noise of the fireworks. And 4th of July, now it's one of my favorite holidays. But I can tell you as a kid, I was not a fan of it at all. But what about you? When you were a kid, what were you most afraid of? I'm gonna give you guys like 30 seconds to turn to the person next to you and tell them what you were most afraid of. All right, come on back now. So I bet some of you probably said spiders. And look, I don't blame you at all. Who likes those things? I mean, they've got 8 legs, they're scary looking. And when I see one, I have a slight fear for just a second. Then I gotta be like, no, Corbin, you got this. And then I may or may not grab a shoe and, smash it because it's a circle of life, right? We all know what it's like to be afraid of something. But have you ever wondered if there was a way to get over your fears? To never be controlled by fear again? In the words of the great poet Taylor Swift, can we actually be fearless? Unfortunately, I'm not so sure that fear is something we can ever get rid of. Sure, your fears are probably not the same now as they were when you were a kid. You may not have a fear of clowns, bugs, or balloons, or even fireworks. But that doesn't mean fear is gone altogether. For most of us, those old silly fears get replaced with new bigger fears as we grow up. These fears come in different forms, like worrying about passing your big math test or science test, or maybe one of your parents losing their jobs, or just being excluded from your friend group. Those are some true fears, and I know there are more, but so many people pretend to be fearless. They try to walk through life like fear isn't real, and if it is real, they act like it's not that big of a deal. But I think we all know that that's just an act. While we might be really good at pretending to be fearless, at times, the reality is none of us can actually escape fear. The more we try, the harder it gets to escape it. You can ignore it for a while and try to say it's nothing and even attempt to push it off to the side, but eventually fear shows back up, and just like that, that's all you think and that's all you can feel and hear. Fear has a way of changing the playlist in our minds, doesn't it? When we let fear take over our thoughts, we get stuck wondering, what if? What if I don't make friends? What if my parents get divorced? What if my family member doesn't get better? Or what if no one asks me to the dance? Fear is a difficult subject to talk about because fear can be helpful. Sometimes those what ifs help us avoid or even be careful around things that could hurt us. Like some people may have a fear of failing. So what does that do? It just pushes them to study harder to pass that test. And it's not all a bad thing, I promise. The problem comes when we let fear take over, when it determines our actions, our thoughts, and our lives. It can hold us back from trying new things or discovering good things. That's when we need to figure out how to create a new playlist. A new thing to think about when you hear fear start creeping in. One of the best things about the Bible is that it gives us examples of real people who had real experiences and they had real feelings just like us. Some of Jesus' closest followers actually experienced something with him that taught them a lot about how to deal with fear. I think it can do the same for us. While on earth, Jesus spent most of his time with a group of 12 close friends. Because they spent so much time with Jesus, they saw him do some pretty amazing things. He healed the sick, he forgave sins, he performed miracles, and all really cool stuff. You'd think, since these guys were Jesus' closest friends, that they'd have nothing to fear, right? After all, they were hanging out with a guy who had the power to literally do anything. What could they have possibly been afraid of with Jesus by their side? Well, let me tell you about a time when his disciples were afraid. Let me set the story up for you. Jesus just got done healing some people and driving out demons from demon-possessed. And then a crowd started to form, and Jesus got in a boat, and his disciples followed him. They were going to the other side of the lake, and while they were traveling with Jesus in the same boat, a huge storm rolled in. The waves were so high, they were literally sweeping over the boat. Can you even imagine being in the middle of a lake or an ocean with just huge waves crashing over this tiny boat? So when all this was happening on, they were looking for a guy, and that guy who could do anything was Jesus. So what happened? Well, we pick up the story in verse 26 in Matthew chapter 8. It says, "Suddenly a furious storm comes up on the lake, so that the waves swept over the boat, but Jesus was sleeping. The disciples went and woke him up, saying, 'Lord, save us, we're gonna drown.'" Hold up, wait a minute. Jesus was doing what? He was taking a nap? I mean, I get he's Jesus and all, he can rest after doing all these amazing things, but his disciples were afraid. They were in the middle of the water riding out a major storm, and the one person who could stop it was resting his eyes while the waves were crashing all around him. Well, when they finally got Jesus awake, they probably thought, whew, he's gonna save us. And spoiler alert, he did. But first he had something to say. Let's take a look. He replied, "You of little faith, why are you so afraid?" Then he got up and rebuked the winds and the waves, and it was completely calm. The men were amazed and asked, "What kind of man is this? Even the wind and waves obey him." Now, I don't know about you, but I'd probably be in the same boat. Get my pun there? I would be scared and worried too. Not sure if Jesus was gonna, help or save us at that time. Now, while I can't be sure because I obviously wasn't there, I don't think Jesus said the disciples had little faith because he was mad. I don't think he was trying to make them feel bad for not having faith. I think he was trying to show them that even when they're afraid, their faith in the one who is bigger than anything can save them. Yes, Jesus calmed the storm, and not only the one raging on the waters, but Jesus calmed the storms and his followers. He calmed their fears, not just by stopping the wind and the waves, but by showing them that fear didn't have the final vote. Did these disciples have a reason to be afraid? Absolutely. They were on the boat in the middle of the water and this huge storm was coming through. That's scary. But Jesus wanted them to know that their fear didn't have to be the only thing they felt. It didn't have to be the only voice that they listened to in the water. It didn't have to be that only song in their playlist. Now, there's a song that we sing during our high school gathering sometimes, and it's definitely on one of my many playlists that I have, but it's called "Fear's Not My Future." And I love the bridge of the song. It says, "Fear's not my future, you are. Sickness is not my story, you are. Heartbreak's not my home, you are. And death is not the end, you are." I think this song is a great reminder that fear is not our future. While we pray for relief against these fears, these sicknesses, and these heartbreaks, they may not be the lasting part of the story God uses in our lives on this side of heaven, but they don't have to be the defining part. So when you start to hear the fear get louder and louder, turn it down and crank this song if you need to, because you control the volume on fear. Jesus' voice and presence could play louder. You just have to turn down the fear and listen to what he has to say. There are still going to be things in life we fear. That's just a part of life. I'm not saying that following Jesus means that you will never fear anything again, but what I'm saying is he can help you walk through your fear. He can help you turn down the volume on fear every day. Think of it this way. We all know that volume buttons on a phone, a TV, or a tablet make the volume go louder or softer. We also have the power to mute the volume or turn it off completely. We might feel the same way when we're afraid. We just want to mute fear and turn it off. When I was a kid, I would have loved to have muted the sound of fireworks and just watch the colors. But remember what we said earlier, sometimes fear is helpful. It can keep us alert or safe. If we just hit mute and we never felt fear, we'd likely end up in some situations that might be harmful for us. Instead, we've got to think of fear like a volume scale. A volume scale doesn't mute it completely, but it turns down the volume. And when we turn down the volume on fear, we're simply not giving it the loudest voice. When fear takes over your thoughts like an annoying song stuck on repeat, you can turn down the volume because you control the volume on fear. Yes, hard things will show up. Yes, things will happen that are scary. And yes, fear creeps in and hangs out sometimes. You might not be able to turn it off, but you can turn it down because you control the volume on fear. One way to do that is focus on what's true instead of letting our mind wander into a million different what-ifs. You can focus on the truth we find in Scripture that reminds us of who God is and that He's with us no matter what and when we experience fear. Take this psalm for example. Even when I walk through the darkest valley, I will not be afraid, for you are close beside me. Your rod and your staff comfort me. Focus on that for a second. We talked about it in our last series, Glow, and I suggest going back and watching it or listening to it if you have the chance to on YouTube. But Jesus is with us in the darkness. He is the light in the darkness. And when we walk through dark times, we don't have to be afraid because He is with us. When I find myself feeling afraid, this is the truth I want to remember. And my challenge to you this week is to memorize that psalm. Let it be the place you start every day when it comes to facing your fears. You control the volume on fear. Maybe you need a little help talking about or even identifying what you're afraid of. Maybe the volume on your fear is really loud and you need someone to encourage you to trust Jesus in the middle of it. Well, the good news is that's exactly what your small group leader or your parent and guardian is for, to help you walk through the circumstances or situations that might be causing you to fear. These adults care about you and are here to remind you that even if your circumstances don't change, you can walk through them with confidence and faith in Jesus, who is in control of it all. At the end of the song, Fear Is Not My Future, it says, goodbye fear, goodbye guilt, goodbye shame, goodbye pain, and goodbye grave, it's a new horizon. That's what we get to say to fear when we let God take control of it. When we start a new playlist in our minds and we don't let the fear get to us, we too can say goodbye to it. And when we say goodbye to it, we can say hello peace, hello joy, hello love, hello strength, and hello hope. It's a new horizon. I'm so glad that you were here this week, and I hope this helped you remember that you control the volume on fear. This week, memorize Psalm 23:4. And when you start to hear fear get louder and louder, you can turn it down by leaning on God and trusting that He will get you through the storm. I hope you guys have a great week. You guys are loved, and you guys are going to finish this conversation and pray in your small groups. Have a great week.